the company always prayed, they always played upon, in the name of competition, we had to do these things. But competition to me is code for a race to the bottom. And so they would use the lowest paying bidder and say, we got to compete with that. And our leadership at that time really didn't, in my opinion, challenge that. And I believe this last year is an example of what happens when you do challenge that.
And what happened? Talk about the results of your...
So, yeah.
You went on strike?
Yeah, our strike. So when I became president, look, I really felt like we needed radical change in this union and what we did. And so we really brought in some new people, combined that with some people that were existing, and revamped how we were going to go about doing things. And so we ran our first ever contract campaign to get the membership rallied around our issues. And then we went into the contract bargaining fight. We had a very different tone with the companies. We said, the deadline meant something. When the contract deadline got there, it's a deadline, not a reference point. And the companies chose to not believe that we meant that.
Did I recall you walking in with a T-shirt that said "Eat the Rich"?
You bet. That was one of the meetings, and that's what this is all about. I mean, our fight, and I think that's why it resonated so much in this nation. Although we're a union, it's been no different for working class people, union or not, in the last several decades. We've seen this huge concentration of wealth at the top, and working class people have been left behind. And so that really was what our fight was about. And as we talked about those things, workers were tired of making all the sacrifice. And in the times of
let me interrupt you,
profits,
because I know something about these things. I got to admit, even I was surprised. It came out that when you began your negotiations, there were new workers at the big three who were making what, $17, $18 an hour?
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? And what happened to wages over the years in real dollars for automobile workers?
So they severely went backwards. We actually, in our planning leading up to bargaining, we actually looked at 2007, and in 2007, a new worker would start at 19 and 50 some cents per hour. When you fast forward to 2019, 12 years later, the starting rate was $18.04 an hour. It actually went back.
12 years come and go, and wages go down.
Yes.
And no doubt, let me guess, the CEO said, "You're hurting, we're going to cut our wages and salaries and benefits," right? Is that what they did as an example?
No, I think their wages went up, by the multitudes, hundreds of percent in some cases. And, in the 4 years leading up to the contract, CEO pay at the big three alone had escalated over 40%.
What, the woman who's running GM made $29 million or something?
Yes.
Is that right? Roughly right?
Yep.
Okay. But your success has not only been at the big three. You took a fight, you did something. These guys did something really heroic and of national significance. They went to the South. And it's no great secret to anybody who knows anything about labor history in America that the South has done everything they could to resist unionization, to pay workers some of the lowest wages in America. Talk about your campaigns in Tennessee and Alabama.
Yeah, so, I've always been a firm believer when I campaigned for this job. I talked a lot about how, in my opinion, bargaining and organizing go hand in hand. And I looked at my grandparents' generation as a great example of that. They left the hills of Tennessee and Kentucky after a depression and moved north, and they were able to get jobs in UAW factories at GM and Chrysler, and they lived the American dream. I mean, it was life-changing for them. And so, when we ran our big three fight, on strike and trying to fight for better conditions for the workers, we started seeing a lot of non-union workers all over the country started sending in cards they were signing to join the union.
They saw the success, your ability to substantially raise wages, and they said, "Hey, pay attention to us."
Yeah, and so it really, that flagged it for us that workers were fed up, whether they're union or not. As I said, working class people in this country are fed up with being left behind. And so, we started reaching out to some of these workers, and, we had some unsuccessful drives at Volkswagen in the past. And so we just really started focusing on all these companies, all these workers nationwide at non-union auto plants, automakers. And the Volkswagen group, the workers there really seemed to be more energetic and were signing more cards at a faster pace. So we just decided to focus there and move forward.
That's in Chattanooga, right?
Yeah, in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And so, and literally when you look at that campaign, it was amazing to see the energy from the workers, just a desire to want better for themselves. And it was a massive most people said we could never win down there. Every time I would do an interview leading up to the vote there, the interviewers would always say, "Do you really believe you can win in the South?" And very cynically. And and I believe we could, because I knew where these workers were and that they wanted better for themselves. And so it was really just a historic moment.
And you not only won. I mean,
won.
I was watching the results coming in. They were coming in live. And I saw 70% pro-union. I thought, I can't believe this. It's going to go down. It didn't. You ended up with what?
73%.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
See, that's something nobody thought you could win to begin with. 73%, unbelievable. All right. You went then to Alabama with Mercedes-Benz. Talk a little bit about that.
So Mercedes was a different story. I mean, and the same story with the workers. The workers were tired of being left behind. I mean, these are all worker-led drives. I mean, the workers were leading these drives, and we were just giving them the tools and giving them the assistance they needed. But it was a very different campaign. Volkswagen, said they would stay neutral. They weren't completely neutral, but what we would call subdued. They didn't really have an aggressive.
Let me jump in. You know this stuff. Let me translate it.
Yeah.
All right. Historically, what happens in this country? Companies spend probably hundreds of millions of dollars in union busting activities, all kinds of ways to try to convince workers. And, it's interesting. You had a connection with some of the German unions as well. So Volkswagen was more or less neutral. Comes to Mercedes-Benz, talk about a little bit what they did to try to beat the union.
And so a lot of times most always when organizing campaigns, when you're trying to organize non-union companies, the companies will, they'll break the law. They'll have what we call captive audience meetings, where they'll call workers in and they'll, give veiled threats such as, if you vote for the union, the plant may close, or, future product won't come here, or, or fire workers. At Mercedes, they fired a couple workers in the process to try to dissuade and discourage workers, to put fear in workers of wanting better.
Not to mention, I thought it was funny, every one of the six Southern governors issued a major statement, got a whole lot of publicity, that the UAW unions are against the values of the South, right? And we strongly oppose union organizing. So that's what you're up against.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so it, so Mercedes' campaign was very different than the Volkswagen campaign. It was very, the company was very aggressive toward the workers and putting fear into the workers but ultimately, the amazing part of that fight is, we lost roughly 300 votes would have flipped the election. We would have won it. But so we were that close. And but the silver lining in that is over 2,000 workers at that plant of 5,000, voted for the union and were brave enough to vote for the union, even given all those things. And so I do believe we'll win there in the future. I believe that you're going to continue to see that grow. And and it doesn't, like I said, we've learned lessons from that. But I think the biggest thing going forward is just that we continue to do what we're doing. We've had another big win at Daimler Trucks in the South, in North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia. Won a record contract there.
And you did something really interesting. Tell the Lordstown story.
And so,
I want people to hear this.
And so just last week, we came to a tentative agreement at Lordstown, Ohio. Used to be a GM assembly plant there that was closed in 2019, and workers were displaced, sent all over the country. And under the Biden administration, a new battery plant was located there. And so when I took over as president, the current status of that location was the starting pay was $16.50 an hour, and it would take 7 years to get to $20 an hour. And really, it was on a race to the bottom. And we made it our goal to turn this battery EV industry around, to set a standard and carry that standard elsewhere. So we just actually concluded bargaining there last week, and really happy to say, the workers still have to vote on this, but at the end of this agreement, the workers will be starting out at $30.50 an hour, and full pay will be making over $35 an hour. So it establishes a living standard, a good standard, which is what the EV battery transition should be, what we call a just transition.